Hello, everyone. Welcome in another episode of Art My Medicine. And today I have a special guest, Charise, who is a fellow artist and fellow writer. And I got infected with admiration for Charise after reading her wonderful book. And yes, she's definitely a warrior, but I will let you, Charise, to say hello and a bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Dorota. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, it's been a ride for the last few years. So I actually used to be an engineer. I used to be a robotics engineer. I worked doing that for about 15 years, and then I left that position to move to Calgary. I live in Toronto, which is in Canada. We moved across the country to Calgary. This was in 2015. And in 2017, I had a manic episode, which was my first. And I was hospitalized and diagnosed with bipolar 1. So it was very traumatic for me. I was shocked. I was 40 years old. I couldn't believe it. And a year later, I had another one, my second episode. I was hospitalized again. And shortly after that, I began working on a book, kind of turning my journals into a book so that I could try to figure out what was happening to me, and which would help me, but I could also try to help other people in similar situations. And that brings us to today. My book was published just last fall. And here we are. I'm working on my next one.
That's brilliant to hear. Oh, I'm so, queuing up to get that second one. The first one is amazing. And anybody who has little awareness of knowledge or knowledge about bipolar is really, recommended that they can see it through your eyes. So through the person who was in the middle of it and trying to navigate of what's going on. And there are references to all the possible, concerns you would have if you suspect that something is not really right. And I loved, how you described all the journey. And it's like, oh my God, the diagnosis in late age or mature age, I should say, it just makes the life upside down for a moment, isn't it?
It definitely did. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's easy at any age. I think being young would have had its challenges too, but certainly at 40, I couldn't accept it. It felt like, how could I have lived my life this far without any major problems already? So it was definitely challenging. I also found one of the things for me that really helped me to be able to accept the diagnosis was when I started reading other people's memoirs and learning through their eyes what had happened. Because at the time, I mean, that was only 2017, and it was so hard to find that kind of personal information, personal journey. So yeah. I thought it was, I thought it was necessary.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned it, because I am accused, as I was recently diagnosed with bipolar. Your book was a kind of treasure to me because it helped me understand what was happening to me. I also had my first full-blown hypomaniac episode lasting for 10 weeks without sleep and stuff like that. First time in my life. But reading, people accuse me that I read a lot about my disease or illness or whatever noun we put there, so I am getting more ill, if so to say. And I am always fighting my battle, saying, if I have been diagnosed with cancer and I read all the books on this globe about cancer, how to live with it, how to accept it, what to eat, what not to eat, it would be perceived perfectly fine. Exactly. But when I'm reading about mental health illness, then I'm giving myself the illness. Yeah. There is a hypocrisy in this world, don't you think?
100%. I don't think people are quite understanding that it is an illness. And if you equate it with something like cancer or diabetes, of course you would research it. Of course you would try to find out everything you could. So yeah, that's horrible. That's a horrible mentality.
Yeah, it is. It is. But unfortunately, it happens. However, as a person who gone through that, terrifying episode, I found reading about others who went similar, similar journey, kind of comforting. Don't you think that, it's getting the comfort is very important when you are shaken really by reality.
Definitely. I found I felt so alone when I was diagnosed, and I didn't know anybody who had bipolar disorder. So I started I mean, it took me even 6 months or so before I was able to start looking for books and finding these memoirs. And some of them were incredible and comforting. And they also were a little bit scary, some of them, about what could happen if I didn't try to figure it out more, try to research more and understand myself better and see what I needed to do to help myself to be stable. So I think that was a bit of a wake-up call too. It was comforting, and it was also a bit like, okay, just, beware. This could happen if you continue to not accept your diagnosis. You might head down a path you don't want to head down.
Exactly. And you mentioned diagnosis at 40. Do you did you do similar thing that I did, that I kind of went through my timeline and try to understand how on earth I have not figured it out earlier? Maybe my life would be a bit better or different, if I knew.
Yeah.
And how on earth, I'm approaching, I am over 40, approaching that age, and then get the diagnosis like that. So I had to find some patterns that happened throughout my life, and I did. And I actually can't believe myself, an advocate for mental health illness, did not spot the signs in herself of completely different diagnosis. Did you find similarity to my journey?
100%. And it's so funny because it's so obvious in hindsight, but when you're living through it, I had no idea. Even when I was going through my manic episode, I just thought I wasn't sleeping at all for 2 weeks. I had maybe 3 hours of sleep a night for 2 weeks. And I thought this was just my typical insomnia and it will pass, it'll be fine. And even as I started to get a little grandiose behavior, I was doing things that were unlike me and kind of lacking judgment and feeling really the effects of my mania, I was still in denial about it. I had no awareness that this was something I needed help. I needed to go to the hospital.
Exactly. Yeah. And this what became available to me, having this kind of full-blown, long-lasting episode, to first of all put my fingers on that there is certainly something wrong, and then, oh my God, I had that before, but it never lasted as long. So I was like you, I was thinking, oh, I'm just not sleeping too well. I never have really. Or I am like, functioning pretty good, to-do list, tick, 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 I am superwoman.
Exactly. I'm just so productive these days. Yeah. It's wonderful. Why would I want to change anything?
Exactly. And I had a funny conversation with my GP, which is the general practitioner, the family doctor, as you say. And she asked me, why haven't you approached us before if you had those moments? I was like, look, depression is the part that I can't deal with. And this was when I was seeking attention and help from medical staff, because it was very difficult to live with. But when I was feeling, my mood was elevated and I was, functioning, I thought that I am in optimal moment of functioning. So what should I do? Come to you and say, you know what, I'm doing pretty well. Something is wrong with me.
Doing better than normal, better than I normally feel. Like I need help to feel worse.
Yeah. It's like, it doesn't make sense, does it? And apparently this is the problem why so many people with living with bipolar are misdiagnosed. Have you been misdiagnosed in the past? Have you had those depression moments?
No, that's interesting. I have had many depressive episodes in my life, but they always seem to be linked with something that could explain them. Like when my most major one I wrote about in my book was my miscarriage when I was my first pregnancy. But even things like moving to university, I was very homesick, and I just seemed to feel things very extremely. When I was laid off from a job, I became very depressed, but they all seemed related. So I didn't ever clue in that it was something more than just related to what I'd experienced. I'd never experienced mania until my episode, the first one, when I was 40. And I took it to be, maybe this is menopause and I'm going into this age where I just have this confidence and I feel wonderful, like life is good. And so I took it
life starts after 40, right?
Exactly. It just felt that way. It just felt so great. Whereas my depression, yes, you're right, I should have probably sought help at times. And I did, after my miscarriage, I did join a support group and I found it extremely helpful. So then I thought that was that. It wasn't anything long-term to be concerned about. Yeah, so I don't really think I had anything I would have sought help for earlier, but it was
Yeah.
so easy to miss the signs.
Of course, of course. And it's very often the kind of stigma there. That's when you say to people, oh, I'm depressed or I have depression, they ask you, so what has happened?
Yeah.
And very often, and this is the stigma, why the stigma attached, that you misinterpreted your episodes because they were linked to some trauma or some events that were
Totally.
saddening and difficult. And many people do that. They think the depression must have a reason why it
Totally.
doesn't.
Yeah, and I started to kind of just justify it as I'm just so sensitive and this is just another thing I have to get through. And even things like season changes they really affect me. And I always
Yeah.
dismissed it as I'm so sensitive, why do seasons bother me so much? And it'll be fine. I just need to write it out. Whereas maybe I should have been getting help all these years every season. It's really fall. Fall makes me really depressed, and then spring makes me manic, but
Yeah.
not as extreme in the past until my first mania. So, but every time through winter when I was depressed, I probably should have talked to someone about that, and I just wrote it off. Like, we learn to just deal with our illness, I think, and try to hide it, because like you say, there is a stigma, and you do, like, if I said to many people, oh, I don't like November, I'm not going to get much sympathy for not liking
You
November.
will from me, because I used to say November is the worst month in the whole year.
Thank you. We can commiserate. But now at least it's March, so everything's wonderful.
Exactly. Sun is shining. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find myself too very dependent on the mood. So hey how I'm living in the Great Britain, England, when it's so miserable.
Oh no.
Yeah, but yeah, the life threw me here, and I kind of stayed. But yeah, you talk about the sensitivity very well in a book, and if you don't mind, I would like to read a passage that I really resonated with. His smile broadens, revealing perfect white teeth, and his eyes lit up. This makes me bristle, and I have to silently remind myself to stay calm. It's difficult for me to feel anything other than irritated when these two men are together and I am the third wheel. But as I have been told, irritability is a symptom of my illness. I have also been told that my illness makes me overly sensitive. So my reactions are sometimes attributed to my illness before being dismissed, at best, or preventing my release from hospital at worst. I have to fake it till I make it, at least when my husband and psychiatrist are in the same room. And that is so typical. I am so frequently told by society, by communities I am around, that I'm taking things just too personally. I am too sensitive. I should toughen up. However, for all my life, I thought that I am a weirdo who feels too much,
I know.
But apparently this is bipolar, isn't it?
100%. My whole life I was told by everybody I knew who was close to me that I was too sensitive. No matter what my reaction to anything, I was overreacting. And even now, having the diagnosis, I find a lot of the times if I react to something that deserves a reaction, people who know I'm bipolar, like if my family are around me, they're a little cautious about, oh, is she, hypomanic, or should we be concerned? And they're a little more concerned even about that than my reaction to whatever is happening.
Yeah.
So that's another frustrating side of it, because I'm told I'm too sensitive and I'm overreacting. And I get this diagnosis where being sensitive and overreacting is a part of my diagnosis. So then anything I react to is often considered an overreaction because of my bipolar rather than the situation. It's very frustrating.
It is. And he's like, you never win.
No.
Because if you don't react, then you are, abrupt and, insensitive.
And yeah. Then I'm moody and exactly.
Yeah. We can win.
Yeah. It's hard.
You mentioned in your book, you describe very well your hospitalization, and this is something that I was dreading. When in that episode of 10 weeks of not sleeping, I was told, if you can't hold on until you see a psychiatrist, you need to go to emergency. And I was petrified that they will section me. What was your reaction to this hospitalization? I know it from the book, but not to sell the book too much and provide the spoilers. Tell us a bit how it was.
Yeah, so so I was in Calgary, Alberta, where everything is wonderful. Like it's a very rosy kind of situation for many people, I should say. For myself, for my family, we were very lucky and privileged. So the hospital we went to, it was new. There was a lot of staff, like there's good medical equipment. So you would expect good treatment, proper treatment.
Yeah.
And the first time I was so gone, like I was so far into my mania. I was really not accepting that we were at a hospital because I needed help. I was really in denial about that. I was convinced we were there because my husband had a surprise of something planned, like a surprise party, or some family were coming to visit us, or I thought I was pregnant again. I was convinced I was pregnant again. So I was convinced there was some good reason why we were at the hospital. So I didn't think anything bad about it going in. I was like, okay, we're now at the hospital. This is just what we're doing today. No big deal. Like it just seemed perfectly fine. And then the experience itself was not bad. It took me a long time to kind of realize. I was there for 2 weeks, and it took me a few days at least, if not close to a week, to realize that I was there because I needed help, because I have a mental illness. And it was very shocking. I felt very alone, and the staff were very pleasant and nice for the most part. But it wasn't a great place. It wasn't a great place to be. I was confused. I didn't have the right resources. My family would come and visit me, but it was hard. My kids didn't want to be in the psych ward. So it was difficult, but it wasn't bad. And then so after a year, I went back into the hospital for my second hospitalization. And this one was bad. This one, they treated me like a person, like a diseased person who deserved no respect, nothing. Like it's in my book, so but they treated me horribly. It was the first time it felt like they were trying to help me. They were trying to figure out what was wrong. And the second time they knew what was wrong. And part of the problem was that I hadn't been taking my medication. So they blamed me for it. They were very annoyed at me. So they treated me horribly. And I felt very traumatized coming out of that time. And shortly after that, we left Calgary, we returned back to Toronto. So it was a huge relief that I won't ever have to go back to that hospital. I would be very reluctant to go back to that hospital. I would be reluctant to go to a Toronto hospital even, because I just don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And I'm unfamiliar with, I feel there's like, you kind of hand over all your rights when you sign into that hospital. And I don't know what they could do to me necessarily, which my doctors told me was my paranoia, which is part of my bipolar, and my lack of judgment and inability to trust, and all of that stuff my doctors told me was part of my disease. However, I think it's fairly typical to kind of be concerned if you don't know what can happen to you, and pretty much anything can happen to you in a hospital. So I would be very reluctant to go to a hospital again anywhere.
Yeah, I don't blame you. You never know, like you said, and it's like we hear so horrible stories about psych wards and the portrayal in media of there are hardly any good portrayals. It's usually some horror stories.
I can't think of any. Can you think of any good portrayals of a psych ward? I can't. I can think of horrible ones that terrify me.
Yeah.
Some of them are really, sometimes I'm flipping through Netflix and I see something that just shocks me so much. It kind of takes me right back into my experience, which wasn't on par with what Netflix is showing, but it just brings me back into that trauma. It's horrible the way media portrays it.
And this is the problem. This is the something wrong is with the system, that we do not perceive the psych ward and the medical staff at psych wards as allies in fighting the battle of mental illness. We perceive it as we will need to be fully armed, to fight for our rights. And this is something that it's very close to your heart. You're trying to, at least you said it in the book, that you tried to make it better for others as you experience a bit of trauma there. What are you trying to achieve? What is the mission there?
Yeah, it's hard because as I'm talking about hospitals, I'm basing it on my experience, which was bad. So people will be put off from going to hospitals, which is what they need in these moments, right? Like hospitals are necessary. Help is necessary. I think in trying to get my message across, what I would ideally like is for staff to be trained better. The staff I have worked with did not know how to deal with me. And I think that's true for a lot of mental illness patients. So I think particularly like security guards or people who aren't necessarily,
medical
workers. Yeah. So that's one thing I would like. But then secondly, I think it's really important to figure out and try to get preventative help so that hospitals aren't necessarily needed. Because my psychiatrist in Calgary was, he was probably very good, but because our relationship started off on such a bad foot, because I was totally manic and didn't trust him at all, or any of the staff at the hospital at all, we had to start from a position of trying to build trust that was very difficult. Whereas my psychiatrist now in Toronto, I so far, knock on wood, have not been hospitalized in Toronto. And I met him and like we moved to Toronto, and then I needed to find support right away. And so I did, luckily. But we developed our relationship over time. So now if he were to tell me to go to the hospital and tell me where to go and what to do, I would believe him. I already have that awareness that he is trying to help me, and we already have that great relationship. So I think, and it's also very difficult because healthcare systems were already so overburdened at the time before COVID. And now, of course, mental health is so much worse. So I know it's not easy to do, but I think preventative awareness is really critical.
Yeah, it is. Well, my grandma used to say that prevention is better than cure, and this is a fact. I waited, for 10 weeks. I have waited to be seen by a seen. If I was seen, it would be even great. I had a phone call consultation, So hello COVID, right? But 10 weeks, and only because I chased it up, because I was reaching the point that I couldn't trust myself. Right. I had those memory blackouts, and I didn't know what, because I was deprived of sleep. 10 weeks, like you said, 3 hours max, maybe 4, and not always in one go. Right. I was exhausted, and maybe if not waiting so long, if I could receive help earlier, I will not write myself to exhaustion, right? Yeah. So if the prevention is and that the system is quicker, many of us would probably avoid having this kind of breakdown, total one.
Oh, definitely. If I had an awareness, or bipolar, it's so hard to diagnose without any kind of extreme episode. But once you get to that point, then it's so hard to recover from. But
exactly.
So 10 weeks to me is actually not that bad. I think when I came to Toronto, we moved back in June, and I needed a psychiatrist. I had already, thankfully, found my GP, my family doctor in Toronto, and saw her right away. She referred me right away. And the first time I saw my psychiatrist was in November, and that was considered a short time period from June to November. Okay. That's brutal. Wow. Like if someone's in a critical, of course you're going to go to the ER if you are in desperate need of mental illness, when a good waiting period in Toronto is, 5-6 months.
Yeah. Wow. That's horrible. That's, oh my God, that's disgrace, for the system to, oh my goodness.
So we need better funding, more psychiatrists.
Yeah. Well, I wish that we will survive until to the time when you can call your local surgery and be seen by at least mental health nurse. But this is on my wish list. I don't know if it will ever
That would
get.
be fantastic. I love that idea.
But yeah, but you are also a very creative person. Not only you have written that lovely book, but you also do and make art. And could you tell us a bit more about that?
I do, although I have not been very inspired through winter lately. So most of my best art was in my first manic period, really when I was hypomanic. And then it went a little bit too far and it started to become really just not attractive. It wasn't artistic anymore. I wouldn't say it was a mess. So in that hypomanic period, I created some really nice art. And then I was depressed after my diagnosis and I couldn't do anything. And I kept trying. I really wanted to create something, but I would sit with a pen or a marker or a pencil or whatever. I couldn't do anything. So I started doing those spirals. I would do a lot of spirals with just words or dashes or a little symbol here and there. And that kind of brought me back into it a little bit. And then I went manic again. So I was creative again when I was manic. I find my art now, when I try to do something, it's very it's very structured. Like it has to be a little more precise, and it has to be like I'm a little more particular about it. So I'm slower, and it's more of a drag. It's not as spontaneous, and it's not as rewarding until it's finally done. But it takes me so long that I'm so tired of it by the end of it. So unfortunately, I haven't been very productive lately or artistic lately. I'm hoping that will change with spring, but not to the point of being manic.
Let's hope, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you actually touch a very interesting topic that many people with bipolar who happen to be also artistically involved, they do have those kind of creative sprees during being hypomaniac or maniac. And that's something amazing that science looks into it. And it feels great, doesn't it?
It definitely does. Yeah. I don't know if I'm more creative or if I'm just more confident. I know I'm definitely more confident when I'm manic. So if I sit down like with a pencil or crayons or whatever, I just go. There's nothing inhibiting me and I just let it out. I don't even know what I'm drawing or painting. I just go and it produces something. Whereas when I'm not manic, I have to think about it more and I'm a little more like doubtful of
Yeah, a bit more self-criticism is a bit
exactly.
more enhanced. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas so that's with my art, but with my writing, I know I have written. I'm more of a writer than an artist. I think I'm both, but I've written much more in my life than I've created artistically, unlike you. But so my writing will flow whenever. Sometimes I have to force it out a bit more and I'm more self-critical, but it's creative either way. I don't find I'm any more creative when I'm manic with my writing. I think I'm just faster.
Oh yes, yes. The time
Yeah.
moves faster for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned at the very beginning that you are working on the second book. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you for asking. So my second book is a work of fiction. It's aimed at younger kids, like around maybe 9 to 12. I haven't quite figured out if it's a little too mature for that young an audience, but at least 12-year-olds would be fine. And it's about mental illness. So it follows four main characters. There are side characters, but it tells the story of four main characters through their eyes, kind of alternating between of each of their interactions with mental illness or mental health issues, based on if it's a family member who has something, like one person, the mom has bipolar disorder, another kid has severe anxiety and like their eating disorder. So it's just telling about different people's perspectives of their own situation to kind of normalize it, because I think for kids, for my kids at least, I was trying to find books for them when I was diagnosed that would help them understand it and be able to relate to it, similar to how Memoirs helped me understand. And I couldn't find anything. There was nothing available. There were one or two books for really little kids that kind of made it cartoony and tried to
Mm.
explain it from that point of view, but there was nothing really approaching a real, like, this age group, an understanding for this kind of an age group. So I thought this would hopefully help kids who might be experiencing any kind of problem, but also help them to understand that just because it looks like someone's life is great doesn't mean it is. There's a lot going on behind the scenes for all of us. So try to just be aware of that to help them with those issues growing up.
That's amazing. And when should we expect that to be live?
I don't know. That's the question. It's spring, so I mean, I'm gonna get going really fast on it.
Good.
I'm hoping, I mean, I think it would take, I'm hoping by this time next year it'll be published.
Brilliant, brilliant. I am sure that your children must be very, very proud of you. Because really, this is how it happened. The idea was born because you lacked, there was a lack of these resources for your children. So you're trying to give back something very, very important. I agree with you that there is not much in a way that children can really identify themselves with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that this will be a bestseller.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to hold you to that.
Yeah. And you also mention in your book this enhancement. During the maniac episode, everything seems to be enhanced, right? Colors, textures.
Oh, yeah. Taste.
What taste? You mentioned some very bizarre combinations of food that is for you a kind of concern if it starts. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. So so for taste, I had started cooking really spontaneously, like I was doing with everything because I was so confident about everything. And a lot of what I did seemed to draw on knowledge that I sort of forgot I had learned over the years, but I was 40, you've gained a lot of knowledge by age 40. So,
Yeah.
and I've been cooking for many years. So for cooking in particular, I started to be very creative in the kitchen, and I would mix whatever I had on hand. I just kind of knew combinations that would work better than other combinations. And for a while it was working. In my hypomania, I was just creating these brilliant, like, gourmet meals. And then I became really fascinated with garbage. I have this, like, I love it anytime, whether I'm manic or not. I really love I guess nature and earth and not creating waste. So I love trying to
Yeah.
repurpose things. So I get a real kick out of, like, my kids will often save the seeds from their apple cores and we'll replant them and we'll just see if something grows. And if most of the time it doesn't, but if it does, it's very fun. Like, it's just a fun thing for us to do. So I became really obsessed with trying to use all of the food waste that I was generating instead of discarding it or putting it in the compost. So, well, I was putting it in the compost, and then in the final meal before I was hospitalized, the final meal that I was cooking, I didn't realize that I was taking things out of the compost to cook for dinner until it was served. I served this meal that I thought was going to be brilliant, and it was garbage. It had been taken out of the compost. And I had been making things like, chicken stock from, like, bones with carrot peelings and, like, the ends of celery and stuff that my grandmother would have done, like, to make chicken stock. I had been doing that and it had been fine. But then I just pushed it past this point of reason where I was actually just serving up chicken bones and carrot peelings and all that stuff as, like, a stew. And it was just, that was the first sign to me that, like, something's really off here, because I had no recollection of doing that. I thought I was just preparing another brilliant gourmet meal. So it was scary in that moment. Yeah. But even now, there are times when I'm not even hypomanic. I'm just having a good day or something, a good week. And I have very creative, results in the kitchen. I create just wonderful meals very spontaneously with similar, like, oh, well, this, rosemary would go well with this, or whatever combinations I just happen to notice. And I think, let me add that. And sometimes it works really well. And then I have to think, like, did I sleep okay last night? Like, is everything all right? Or I have to kind of just second guess if what
I call it reality checks.
Exactly. Reality
Yeah.
check. Yeah. But it's like, it's fine. I haven't had a manic episode since 2018. I've been doing everything really properly, you know, everything my psychiatrist says to do, I'm doing, and I've been researching my own stuff and my therapist, like I'm doing all the stuff and I've been staying pretty stable. So I still, 4 years, I'm still like, am I like, did I sleep okay? Is everything okay? Reality check.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
And you know, do you have any triggers if you want to share them? Do you know what brings
Oh yeah.
you know, the yeah, you do.
We all have triggers, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like I know my husband's triggers and he's not bipolar, but he still has triggers. But for
Yeah.
me, the biggest trigger is disrespect. So if people are talking over me, interrupting me, which sorry, I just interrupted you to answer
That's
this
okay.
question. If I'm being ignored, if I feel disrespected, I get very angry very quickly.
Mm,
And I know how to deal with it, but I do experience it very intensely.
mm. That's very interesting that you say that you experience anger, because I am perceived as a person who has anger issues, and I lash out when like you triggered. You know, my triggers may be a bit different, but also disrespect is among them. Um, do you think that this is a symptom of our illness, this aggression, not aggression that we are, you know, beating somebody out, but the anger that really needs to get out?
I don't It's hard. That's a really great question. It's hard to say. I don't think anyone has really researched it. I see anger in so many people. And I have that one post. I keep sharing that photo of the broken ukulele that my husband broke in anger
Mm,
after we were having an argument because I'd stopped taking my medication. And so many people are angry. Yet for bipolar people, that's a real source of, oh, she's angry, you know, like it is really a
mm,
focal point, I find.
yeah.
I don't know if it's linked because I see a lot of people who, especially with coming through COVID, people are short and irritable. Like people lose
Yeah.
their temper very quickly for reasons that are kind of ridiculous to me. So I don't know. It's hard to
Yeah,
say.
but we get judged. Yeah.
We get judged. 100% we get judged. And also people worry that what we're going to do with our anger, so
Oh, yeah.
I'm always like, I make it very obvious that I'm dealing with my anger in a healthy way, but I have to make it very obvious to everyone, even my
Yeah.
family who know, like they know I'm not going to do
Oh,
anything.
me too. You know, I have a friend, a very good friend who has bipolar, who helped me in very early you know, stages where I really thought that I am batshit crazy and that's it, you know. And he was helping me because he's bipolar but stable like you, so he was able to, you know, to go through my worries and concerns. And sometimes I contact him and say like, you know, I had a lash out, but this and this happened. It's like, tell me, was I unreasonable or my anger is reasonable?
Exactly. You're right. I do that too with my husband. I'll say like, but this and this and this happened, and anyone would react to that. And he'll say, anyone would react to that. Like, it's very, yeah.
Yeah. But it's
So it's
funny that
hard.
we need that confirmation, don't we? That we always perceive our reactions through those lenses of illness. And doesn't mean that I am like having a relapse. Doesn't mean that I am going into another episode. There is always that questioning, and that's tiring, isn't it?
It's very tiring. It's one of the challenges, along with the stigma. I think that one is really hard to live with on a day-to-day basis because
Yeah.
I feel like I'm constantly monitoring what I'm doing or saying to present a certain way. And it's not that I would present differently otherwise. And it's not that I present differently than I did prior to my diagnosis for 40 years,
Yeah.
but I feel like because people know, and I'm very open about it. So it's not just my family, like quite a few people know in my community that I'm bipolar. So I'm very aware that if they know that label, I have to present as like calm and rational at all times, which
Yeah.
is really hard. For
It is.
anybody to do. I don't think it's hard for a bipolar person. It's hard to not react to
Of course, of
situations. Yeah.
course. Yeah, but yeah, like you said, we get judged, and therefore we have the judge in us. I would
Yes,
say that we have it a bit more, the person sitting on our shoulder and
definitely.
saying that, was that reasonable? Is it a sign of
Definitely.
illness, or is it you?
Yeah, definitely. Especially through COVID, a couple of my conversations with my psychiatrist and my therapist, I've described situations to them, and I've said things about like I'm more irritable these days, I've noticed, and I'm presenting it to them, and both of them every time they validate how I'm feeling as like that's how any other person would feel, especially now in COVID. Everybody's irritable. Like it's not
Yeah,
something to really be that concerned about. And it's just helpful to have that support, because you're
of
right. We
course.
are constantly checking ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. And we mentioned, we touched slightly the medication issue, and the aspect of taking them or not taking them.
Yes.
Um, your story happened to lead you to another episode when you stopped taking them. But we all have those moments when we feel pretty stable. We think, oh yeah, I can do it, right? I can do it. So maybe I don't need that pill, or I don't need that pill. And I
Definitely.
think it happens to all of us.
Yeah.
But your journey happened to end up in the hospital again, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So that was kind of good in a way because it really scared me into I need to keep taking this medication. And so I had that first year when I was diagnosed, and then I lived for a year mostly depressed. And then I was starting to come out of my depression that following spring and starting to feel better and starting to doubt, why do I need this medication? And I had actually spoken with my psychiatrist, and we had come up with a plan that I was going to try to wean off of the medication. So I felt this kind of, well, if I can wean off then, why can't I wean off now kind of
Yeah.
confidence? And I didn't need it my whole life. So why would I need it now at age 40? And I'm sure it'll be fine. But I ended up back in the hospital within a few weeks. And it was such a bad experience that, I mean, I don't love taking my medication, but I don't think I would love taking heart medication. Like I would
Mm.
just take it. So that's how I feel about my medication now. I need it. I don't want to be in the hospital. So if this is what I need to do, then I'll do it.
But it comes with a kind of self-defeat feeling, I think. And
Mhm.
at least for me, I when I finally accepted, going on any type of psychiatric medication, uh, it's a bit like, okay, I need to give in. And
Mhm.
I don't know
Comply.
why it's like that in a mental health illness. Like if it was diabetes or whatever, I would perhaps also feel that, that there is a certain defeat, but I wouldn't feel it so, I don't know, deeply touching the areas of me that it's like, okay, so it doesn't mean that I'm crazy.
Mhm.
That,
Yeah, that's a
do I
really good
compare it
point. I think I definitely felt that way the first year. And if I was on, like I'm on lithium, so all my doctors have told me that's fairly benign. I don't know if that's true or not. Whenever I've tried to research lithium, I don't get much information about it. So
Mm,
I don't know if I'm going to have problems down the road. Maybe that kind of scares me more than anything, that there will be problems later. But um, so definitely in that first year when I was also on olanzapine and clonazepam for sleeping, which I still do occasionally need. But the olanzapine was a hard one. I found that one, I felt physical responses to it and like downsides that I just didn't like. And I had memory
mm,
issues at the time. So I really didn't want to be on olanzapine based on the side effects I was experiencing at the time. And maybe lithium, I'm experiencing side effects too that I don't really know are connected, and they could be, but I've just accepted it. I think I don't feel I agree. When I think about it, I'm like, yeah, it is a weakness. It does feel like I'm giving in to something and I shouldn't have
mm.
to do this. I just don't it doesn't affect me that much anymore. I think I've come to terms with like I'm stable. I've been stable for years, so I'll just keep doing it.
Perhaps, yeah, perhaps with that stability comes the acceptance and a kind of, okay, yes, that's really needed. But
Yeah.
being early in the journey, I have moments, and when my partner asks me, "Did you take your pill?" I
Oh,
just
I
sometimes want
hate
to
that
punch
question.
him.
Yes. I told my husband early on, like, stop asking me that because it sounds like, and he would say, I'm just being caring. Like, I just want to make sure you didn't forget. And I'm like, well, it
Yeah,
sounds like you're being insulting and you think
yeah,
I'm, a child and I need to be told to
yeah.
take my medicine. So
Oh, thank you,
that's not.
universe, you say that, because this is exactly how I feel.
Yeah, no, I remember saying to him, like, it would be one thing if you brought me my medicine with my water, because I leave it on the counter when it's after dinner. I take it out and I put it there. So I know I still have to take it. I won't forget. And if he sees it, bring it with a glass of water. And then I know you're just being caring and it doesn't sound condescending. It's just a
Yeah.
nice action. And he's never done that. So he stopped asking, but
Oh my God. Yeah. That's amazing. And we are mentioning our partners or your husband. And did your husband receive any kind of help? Because my partner is saying living with you who has bipolar, it is challenging, and you need to understand that I am also having certain issues to accept, to deal with. So I'm
yeah.
thinking, my partner has not been even invited to any talk or anything like that by my GP or whatever. Did
Okay.
your husband receive any help to how to live with it?
So that's a great question. When we were in the hospital, when I was diagnosed, that was when my husband and my psychiatrist got along so well.
Yeah.
And it used to irritate me so much because I felt like they were just the men deciding what was happening to me or like
Yeah.
ganging up on me to get me to comply. And it was very stressful. But he got a couple of pamphlets for like kind of groups he could join as like family support. He never did join any of them and nobody followed up with him in Calgary. And then when we moved to Toronto, I started seeing a therapist and my new psychiatrist who they both asked if he was talking to anybody. So my psychiatrist, he came to a few of the appointments and he would give his perspective of how like the same story that I had told from my perspective. So my psychiatrist could get a better understanding from both sides, which was fine because they weren't too like buddy about it like the Calgary one had been.
Yeah.
But so the most he's done is come to psychiatrist appointments with me, but where I'm the primary focus. He's never seen a doctor for any kind of support or been in any kind of support group.
Mm.
He did go to a therapist once based on the urging of my therapist who really recommended it for him as just a support. And he didn't enjoy it. He doesn't like to talk about feelings. He's not an emotional guy. He's not sensitive. Like he's very out of touch. He doesn't want to be discussing things. He just wants to get on with it kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he's very strong mentally. He doesn't, he's very like confident. He's very capable. So he didn't seem to have any need. He didn't want to continue it. The one thing he did, I don't know if you know Julie Fast.
No.
She's a writer based in, I think, Seattle or somewhere in the States anyway. And she has written a number of books about, she's bipolar, and she's written a number of books about how to support yourself as a person with bipolar and also family, like how to be a person who supports a family member. And he did get a few of her books. I don't know if he finished all of them because I think if you've read one, they sort of have the same message. But I kind of think it boils down to like, just be sensitive that this could be bipolar and like back off from, a triggering, like starting an
Yeah.
argument about something. But I don't even know if he does that all that much. Like I think he could have benefited from researching more, but he didn't do it. And like I think we've always kind of been independent where I took care of myself and he took care of himself, and I think he just assumed that would be the same. And it's sort of, except for my second manic episode and hospitalization, it's sort of playing out fine for him, I think. So he doesn't
That's
really
good.
focus on it.
Yeah, I just ask because I had that that moment of realization when I got put on antipsychotic drug, right? And I'm thinking, oh my God, it's like, unless he reads the leaflet, which he will not because it's like font 6, right? And
Yeah.
several pages.
Yeah.
Who can read that font? I don't know. However, it's like he doesn't even know what to look out for. It's like, I think that people who are newly diagnosed or come on new drugs, they should have at least some kind of advisory from the GP or whoever prescribes that medication, because if you live with the person, we like you said, we sometimes can't notice what's happening. We just think, oh, I feel great. It's, it's spring, but we may be already displaying some signs that something is not right when we are taking this medication. But partners or people who we would like to appoint to be our kind of reality check should be informed by a professional, I think, about what to look out for.
100%. And I think that's a real gap right now. I mean, there's so little support for even patients. So we need to be able to have family support. It's a real challenge. I think for my husband, it took him a while. It took us a few years. I mean, I wrote about it. I'm sure you read it, some of our conversations where he was very kind of angry. I think he was really disappointed that I had this illness, and it really took a while for him to realize it was something that, like, it wasn't my fault. Like, so going off the medicine was my fault. So that he was really angry about. But just in general, if I'm going manic, I need support. I don't need to be yelled at. Like, even just that understanding, it took him a while to get that, because no one really explained it to him. You're right. There's just not enough support in that situation.
Yeah. And it's okay for us to give insight when we are stable and we can articulate what's happening. But, in the moment of in the heat moment, when it's happening to you, it's very difficult to, to navigate around it. And then there are loved ones who are in the middle of that tornado too, and they should be looked after by system in some way as well. But like you said, there is a huge gap.
I think I mean, if he were to talk to someone like a therapist, I think that could be helpful depending on how open he is, like therapy is a two-way street. So
well, I have very funny situation with my psychiatrist. I don't know even if I should call him mine, because it's like I just had, a few phone call conversations, and I'm going to see him face to face in April. However, and this compares to your these links to the description you gave about two different psychiatrists and different relationship you were able to establish, because my psychiatrist started the conversation with me from a lie.
Oh no.
That's a bad start. To me. Very bad start. And later, I'm receiving my medication, and there is a description, because I am the weirdo who reads those 6 font leaflets, right? Because medical staff tried to kill me once, and I said never again.
Oh no.
So, I'm reading it, and there is a description that this particular drug is also used for people who have anger issues. And I'm thinking, you bleep, it's like, of course I had anger issues. Of course you triggered me because you lied to me, and I hate being lied to.
No, lies are terrible. That's one of my triggers too. Like I lump that into disrespect, but there was even just yesterday, a hostess at a restaurant was lying about like the table, and we see things a certain way, right? That other people don't see. My psychiatrist has told me this many times, that like when he read my book, he could see like the level of detail I see and the quick understanding of words. We see things a certain way. So this woman was telling me something that was like, it was a lie. She was clearly lying. And I caught her in it right away, but she was still in denial about it and trying to like fudge information. And I was starting to get really angry because I was like, don't lie to me. Like, that's a really hard one when people lie. What did your psychiatrist say? That
there was I supposed to have an 11 a.m. phone call from my psychiatrist. It reached 11:40. I was in a teaching session then, and the person who was setting up the appointment, I told them, okay, there is no other time the doctor can do. Okay, I will take 11 a.m. However, if they call me once and I don't answer, please make them call again, because it means that I just need to set students with some
Right.
tasks to be able to talk.
Right.
So they said, of course. And then, already anticipation, my first ever conversation with a
Yeah,
psychiatrist,
that's tough when you've got a class going on.
yeah. And, and I'm thinking like 10 past 11, nothing, 15, nothing, 20, nothing. I reached 11:40 and I was already in full eruption of a volcano.
Yeah.
Had to call them. They didn't even provide me with the name of that psychiatrist. So I had to reach 5 switchboards to reach him, right? And then he's saying, but I did call you at 11. It was busy. Bullshit. It wasn't busy. I said, but even if it was busy, you had a notification there in my file that I want you to call again straight away, because maybe I just couldn't talk then, right?
Yeah.
And you didn't. And you're telling me you called me? No, you haven't.
Yeah.
So it really, so I was very angry, and he was asking stupid questions. Like, I know that they have to ask those questions, but you feel like that little when they ask those questions. And, he was so condescending and so yeah, I'm a bit, in doubt how our relationship is going from there.
Yeah, that's a tricky one for sure. I mean, hopefully he's better in person when you see him in April.
Yeah.
I think hope as well, like, we're probably similar, and I think it's fairly some like a characteristic almost of people with bipolar. Like, we're very aware of specific words, and we're very aware of, like, if someone says something that's vague, it sounds a little funny. Or if he says something that someone else will buy, like another person might be like, oh, he tried. Okay. So he just can use it as an excuse and not think it's a big deal. And maybe other people don't think it's a big deal, but it is a big deal. Like to someone like you or someone like me, it is a big deal. And it's not necessarily bipolar. It's just the way we're wired a little bit. So
yeah. And it's like, in a hypomaniac episode, you are very busy. You have many projects running, and then somebody within the 40 minutes he couldn't call again. It's like, come on. What I mean?
That's kind of lame. I would be very disappointed too. But hopefully he's better in person.
I really do hope, as I need help, but I know that I'm very reluctant to receive help from people who I don't trust.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Me too.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's 3 minutes to 3. We need to wind up. Yeah. Well, I could talk to you for hours and hours without end. But I have a surprise for you. I have the surprise for every guest on my podcast. So I drew a picture, or painted a picture, whichever way we put it, with you in my mind. So I never have any direction. I approach a piece of paper with just thinking about what I know about this person, how I feel, the energy, and always something emerges. So I have a painting to share with you, and I do offer for my guests to purchase the painting, no matter how small money, and then 20% of it goes to the platform of the Mental Health Warriors as they run on donations.
You're
Would
amazing.
you like to see?
I would love to see it. I'm so I'm inspired. Wow, that is gorgeous.
Yeah. A bit of nudity, but I couldn't help it, because we know that bipolar is also, the symptoms is about feeling attractive, and sexuality is kind of enhanced, I would say.
Yes.
And it's just, I started from a scribble, and that woman evolved from the scribble.
That is amazing. I love it. That evolved from a scribble.
Yeah, and I titled it Orange Dance.
That is gorgeous. Thank you. I love it.
Yeah, well, I loved having you and loved chatting to you. Thank you so much for coming. If there are people there who would like to reach out to you or find your books or your website, how they can do that?
So my website is just my name, charisejewell.com. So it's pretty easy. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, but I should have written in my handle, in my little title there, but it's Reese Chael. It's ReeseChaell. That was a name that came out of one of my main needs. So it became kind of a pseudonym for me online. So yeah, that would
Brilliant.
be great. If anyone wants to reach out, I'd be happy to chat.
And definitely keep us in the light when the book is coming, and perhaps we could have you then again, and we could talk about the book, the second book, a bit more. Anybody who is interested in your first book, it is so must read, and I love the title, Crazy Memoir of a Mom Gone Mad. It is such a good read. I really recommend it to anyone who wants to know a bit more about bipolar. And it's a lived experience, and I cherish books with lived experience, because non-fiction gives you this kind of different dimension to whatever experience it describes. So well done for writing it. I think it's amazing.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure. I love talking with you.
Thank you so much, and it's likewise. So everyone who is watching or will watch the rewatch, the next episode of Art My Medicine will be in 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. You will see some promos on my social media. Thank you for watching, and have a lovely afternoon.